welcome to another edition of MWC Shorts. I'm joined today by Harrison Leung from McKinsey and Xena Wood from Exeter University, and we're going to be talking about a topic around reskilling for Industry X, which would have been a panel discussion as part of the Industry X theme at MWC Barcelona. So now I'll hand over to Harrison to talk a bit more and introduce himself and the discussion. Harrison, over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Karen. Hello, everyone. My name is Harrison Leung. I am a partner from McKinsey based out of a New Jersey office, and I primarily serve telecom, media, and high-tech players in the areas of technology and digital. Before we get started, why don't I pass the ball over to Xena so she can introduce herself.
Thanks, Harrison. Hi, everyone. So my name is Xena Wood. I'm a Senior Research Fellow in the Digital Economy at the University of Exeter. I'm based in an interdisciplinary group called INDEX, the Initiative for the Digital Economy at Exeter, and we focus on providing practical insights and measurable impacts for organisations who are looking to address the effects of digital transformation and who wish to thrive in the digital economy.
Great. Thanks a lot, Xena. So the focus of this session is really looking at how organizations are facing major skill gaps as we enter an area where technologies like IoT, data analytics, AI, and robotics have become central to their businesses. Graduates and experienced professionals with the right skill sets can be hard to find, with companies often in competition for a limited pool of talent. A balance must be struck in order to fully capitalize on the promise of Industry X, whilst ensuring that people are still the ones leading this innovation. New approaches to employee training and career development are often needed. Perhaps AI itself can be the answer. Now, when we look at some of the research that has been done, we see that technology on its own is neither really a good thing or a bad thing. However, it does have a profound effect to the broader society, especially as it occupies a larger part of our lives, both as consumers as well as employees. In this particular survey, we see that overall, technology actually has a generally positive impact to the well-being factor of our citizens. However, there's two areas that are, I would say, highest from a negative impact perspective. First is trust in society, and I think this is primarily driven based on some of the ethics in AI and trust in the data analytics in terms of how people are targeting and the worries of some of the online firms and the activities that they're doing. Second is job security. Because of the advances in technology, many people are actually quite concerned about their job security and what that would look like in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. Now, when we look at the same research and report, by 2030, Western world will see a significant shift in the type of work that's being done. This is actually including both the Western world as well as the US. In the 5 categories of labor, from physical manual, basic cognitive, higher cognitive, social and emotional, to technological, the 2 that actually decrease by the largest amount of hours from the largest base, so you can look at that from an absolute sense, is the physical and manual, as well as basic cognitive. These are the skills that are generally more of the, relating to basic data input and processing, basic work in terms of physical labor and managing different hardware, as well as equipment. There's going to be a higher need and higher push into the higher cognitive type of skill sets, ranging from creativity, problem solving, entrepreneurship, leadership, and even technology type skills like programming, as well as analytics. Now, what does this mean? This means that there's actually tremendous risks and opportunity to our citizens and constituents. We see that the US itself has lost close to 5 million manufacturing jobs already, particularly due to automation, currently making it a central point on the current campaign trail. Secondly, almost 40% of Americans are in occupational categories that will shrink by 2030. So what we would love to do is get into a few questions with Xena to really deep dive into some of the effects and as well as the related implications. So Xena, can you tell us a little bit on what are the tech innovations that will lead to the largest impact? What will be good? What will be bad?
Okay, so for me, I think the technical innovation that's going to have the largest impact is artificial intelligence, and that's because it covers such a broad range of topics and subdisciplines of computer science. So artificial intelligence is looking at getting a machine to simulate some form of human intelligence, and so there's different components for that could be possible. So it could be a robot that we see in the media that can navigate an environment, or some sort of avatar that can communicate with an individual, or it could be a piece of software that we don't necessarily see that's running on a platform that can analyze large amounts of data to come up with actual insights on that data. So I think that's going to have the largest impact. I think, like all technological innovations, as you've already noted, can be positive or negative. As you've already noted, it is going to change the skill set of the workforce that companies and organizations need, and there's great amounts of potential there. But it also requires technology to work with representatives from, say, the legal profession to develop the necessary ethical and legal frameworks for some of this technology to be put in place.
I really like the examples, Xena, you had raised. I would also add autonomous driving and driverless cars as well, because, you know, both from the world of, you know, mass transportation to, you know, travel logistics to even now shared economy as well. So Uber, Tesla, etc. What are some of the innovations that you feel are either overhyped or underhyped? Meaning, maybe we see a lot of press, potentially in your world in academia, in research, a lot of funding there, but, you know, from your perspective, it may or may not pan out.
So obviously, historically, there's been a lot of hype over AI, and we see a lot of great examples, as I've already referenced, in films, but also that we read about in books where we didn't really have the capabilities there. Just to get a machine to be able to process its environment and let it freely navigate is actually quite a complex task. So I think the fact that we've seen all these examples in the media has led to overhyping, and also led to this, well, one of the factors that has led to this problem in trust, because we see in these films where these robots are taking over our lives, or maybe threatening us, and there is this trust issue. I think another factor with AI, not focusing on the robotics side, but the data analytics side, is the explainability and transparency of the algorithms and how these algorithms, so how these methods come up with the results that they get. And I think we need some advancements there in order to improve trust, but also the ability for some of these algorithms to be used more generally.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on as well, Xena, because if you remember the slide that we had shown, trust, actually even higher than job security, is the #1 negative impact that people see from a well-being factor perspective. Another thing you mentioned that I want to probe a little bit on, Xena, was the notion on the people in the workforce. And I guess my question to you is, you know, from an action perspective, how do we actually prepare for something like this at such a scale, at such a, you know, big departure from where people are today? What do we do, and how do we actually facilitate change that's ahead?
Yeah, and I think reskilling is key. So companies need to work with their employees to recognize that the workforce skill set will need to change, both in gaining more digital skills, and there's examples of companies who have developed suitable training programs for that, but also recognizing that there's going to be, or likely to be, a change in working practice. So there's going to be a push to more cross-functional teams, more agile working practices, and recognizing that it's not just the technological skills that need to be there for those. So skills such as creativity, critical thinking, innovation, and problem solving also need to be recognized as key in the future workforce.
Are there any best practices that you can share that would assist companies in shifting this way of working? Because I really like the thought that you have raised, that this is not just a technology transformation or a technology evolution, but it is much broader than that, right? It is really encompassing the people aspect, the talent and development, everything, right? Is there some best practices you can share?
So there's examples of companies that have developed their own training programs, and what we're seeing in universities increasingly is organisations partnering with education institutions like ours to develop suitable training programs and identifying the future skill sets necessary and the training programs that would match those. And so ourselves at Index, our group, we do a number of executive education programs which are tailored to companies, but also developing wider training programs that focus on leaders of these organizations and making sure they've got the technological foundations, management practices, and agile learning approaches that are going to be needed to thrive in a digital economy. A more specific example, and one that has been reported widely, is that of JP Morgan, who have partnered with MIT's Initiative for Digital Economy to come up with a 5-year global initiative that identifies future skill sets and the training programs needed to move towards those skill sets.
Yeah, that is definitely a very good example, Xena. And what I would love now is to, if we just step back and, remove ourselves from the overarching, but actually deep dive, are there any differences from your perspective in the different geographies, whether it's based on, the different countries that are out there? And as you saw some of the research that I've shown, it's been primarily the Western world, right, and the US. Are there any differences to the other geographies that you see, maybe particularly in the UK, as well as what about rural versus urban? Are there any shifts there that we also need to be mindful of, given this technological and operating model shift?
Yeah, no, I think definitely. And if I take, say, a UK perspective, so we have a mix of urban and rural areas. And so we have many technological innovations now that allow employees to work, say, remotely from their team, which can be great in improving work-life balance, employee well-being. But in order for these technological innovations to be made the most of, we need the necessary infrastructure. So we need uniform access to good internet. So 5G needs to be uniformly accessible both in urban and the rural areas. And we also need good transport links as well, because face-to-face meetings are still going to be important, even necessarily someone moving into a rural area. And so, as well as looking at the technological innovations, I think we need to focus on the wider infrastructure that needs to be there for people to make the most of these.
What about from gender perspective? Are there any differences and nuance there?
Yeah, so there's been an increasing amount of research looking at how digital innovations is going to affect men and women differently. And so a report I would reference is that from McKinsey Global Initiative, who released a report last year, 2019, which looked at the effect automation is going to have on men and women. And there was two things, or key things I drew from that report. The first was noting that men and women tend to cluster in different occupations, and different occupations are going to be affected differently. And the second is that women tend to be in lower wage occupations, and it's likely that those occupations are the ones that are going to shrink due to automation. And so reskilling is key, and organisations developing those reskilling programs, but also recognising, as the report notes and much existing research has as well, the long existing barriers that are there. So women tend to have lower participation in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, than men. And also recognizing that people in unpaid care roles are often less likely to have, are likely to have less time for reskilling. So trying to recognize that when developing their training programs.
Great. Thank you for this. And this is truly a fascinating and very impactful and critical topic. And I'm glad we have, academia, companies, and everyone looking at it just because of the sheer importance. Are there any parting words or final thoughts from your side, Xena?
I think my parting words would be somewhat very much what you've just noted, that academia, industry, and government need to come together, not just to develop reskilling training programs, but also to ensure a future talent pipeline is there. So it's not so small in future years. And I think we need to work together as communities to achieve that.
Thank you again, Xena. I just wanted to thank you for coming in and having this talk on reskilling for Industry X.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.